You might be wondering right now, why am I here, listening to these words, in this exact moment of my life? And I want you to know there is no coincidence. If this message has found its way to you, it is not random chance. It is proof that something deep within you has already begun to shift. Life is not a blind river dragging you downstream. It is a mirror, reflecting back to you the very way you are observing, feeling, and choosing in each breath you take. Every vibration you carry is like a signal you are transmitting, and the universe silent, neutral, but unfailingly faithful, simply echoes back that exact frequency. When you understand this, something begins to soften inside you. The weight you've been carrying, the stories you've been repeating, suddenly they no longer feel like unshakable truths. They are echoes, reflections of where your focus has been. And if reflection is all they are, then you have more freedom than you ever realized. Because the moment you choose to observe differently, the mirror must change. It cannot hold on to an old image when a new one is being lived from within you. I've walked through years where I thought life was something happening to me, something outside of my control. And I know what it feels like to wake up heavy, convinced that nothing could change. But the day I started to watch my thoughts, not as enemies to fight, but as signals of my vibration, something shifted. I saw that I wasn't trapped by the circumstances, I was trapped by the way I was observing them. And if I could breathe differently, notice differently, interpret differently, then slowly, like dawn breaking after a long night, my outer world began to rearrange itself to match the new inner song. It is not about forcing yourself to be positive, and it is not about pretending that pain doesn't exist. Life has its storms, and to deny them is to stay asleep. What I'm speaking of is the courage to look at the storm and say, what if this, too, is guiding me? What if beneath the noise, there is something waiting to be discovered? That question alone shifts the energy. Suddenly, instead of being a prisoner of fear, you become a witness, un explorer. Even in the middle of chaos, think of it like tuning a radio. When you are locked into one station, say, a channel of fear or resentment, you hear the same song over and over again. It feels like the only music there is. But the moment you turn the dial, even slightly, a new sound breaks through. Gratitude has its own frequency. Curiosity has its own station. Love, too, has a wavelength. And when you begin to observe life through one of those frequencies, you don't just hear new music, you start living inside it. And everything around you rearranges to play along. So ask yourself gently, what frequency am I tuned to today? Not as a judgment, but as an invitation. If you tune into gratitude, what new detail might you notice that you've been blind to? If you tune into curiosity, what possibility might suddenly appear on the horizon? This is not about wearing rose-colored glasses. It is about training your awareness to recognize the full spectrum of reality instead of the narrow slice your fears have been feeding you. I remember meeting someone who felt invisible in her workplace. For years, she carried the belief that no one respected her. And every day she scanned the environment for proof of it. And of course, she found it. But when she started shifting her observation, choosing, deliberately, to notice the small gestures of appreciation, the invitations to collaborate, suddenly, her reality began to shift as well. In time, she was offered leadership roles, and she looked back astonished, realizing that the change had not begun out there. It had begun in the way she had chosen to see. That is the gift of observation. It is not passive. It is creative. Each time you observe from love instead of fear, you are not only transforming your own life, but you are adding a note to the collective song of humanity. Consciousness is not private. It is a river we all share, and your choice of frequency becomes part of the current that moves through us all. So here you are, in this exact moment, hearing these words, not because it's an accident, but because your inner being is already calling for a new way of seeing. This is not about striving harder. It is about softening enough to allow, letting go of the need to control, and instead trusting that by shifting the lens through which you look, the world will reflect something more aligned, more harmonious, more true. The universe is listening. Right now, in this breath, every whisper you speak inside yourself is sketching the outline of the future you will step into. So choose gently, choose words that lift you, choose thoughts that free you, and most of all, choose the observation that reminds you you are not a victim of life. You are a co-creator with it. And perhaps tonight, as you rest your head on the pillow, you might let this truth settle just by changing how you observe. You have already begun to change everything. 1. The power of awareness. Awareness is not something abstract or distant. It is the very lens through which you meet life every single day. Reality, as we often think of it, feels like something solid, fixed, and unchangeable. But the truth is far softer, far more fluid than we imagine. It is not a rigid wall you are pressed against. It is more like a vast mosaic, a living tapestry of perception. And every thought you hold, every belief you nurture, every moment of attention you give, is like placing a tile into that mosaic. Slowly, piece by piece, the image of your world is formed. For years, many of us walk around believing we are simply staring at the finished painting of life. We think it has been decided already. We look at the pieces and assume this is the only arrangement possible. I was born here, in these circumstances. This is my family, my body, my job. This is the hand I was dealt. And so, we settle for the picture as it appears. But the deeper reality is that you are not just the observer of the mosaic, you are also the artist. You hold the brush. Your consciousness is not passively looking, it is actively shaping. Think of it this way: when you change the frame through which you look, the picture inside seems to transform. If you walk outside on a rainy morning and say, "What a miserable day," then your body, your mood, your energy, all of it aligns with that perspective. But if you step into the same rain and whisper, "How beautiful that the earth is drinking," how rare this sound of raindrops against the window, suddenly, your entire reality shifts. Nothing out there has changed. The sky is still gray. The water still falls. But you are living inside a different world because your awareness has chosen a different piece for the puzzle. The mistake we so often make is thinking life happens to us. But the truth is, life happens through us. Your awareness is like light through a prism. Aim it toward fear, and the world fractures into shadows. Aim it toward gratitude, and suddenly the same world glows with colors you didn't see before. I remember a woman who once told me she spent years convinced she was invisible at work. No one saw her. No one valued her, at least. That was the story she carried. And so, her awareness only noticed the moments that confirmed it. The boss forgetting her name, colleagues not inviting her into meetings, the silence after she spoke up. But when she began a quiet practice of shifting her awareness, choosing each morning to ask, "Where am I seen today? Where am I valued?" something astonishing happened. She noticed small smiles, small thank yous, small acknowledgments she had overlooked before. And as her awareness rearranged the mosaic, her reality followed. Within months, she was invited into leadership roles, trusted with projects, and honored in ways she never thought possible. This is not magic. This is the raw mechanics of consciousness. Your attention is the architect. What you stare at grows. What you feed with thought multiplies. Reality is not fixed stone. It is clay, soft under the warmth of awareness. And yet, this truth is not about forcing yourself into endless positive thinking. It is not about pretending that pain does not exist or past wounds don't ache. No, it is about choosing the quality of your gaze, To say, even here, in the middle of my struggle, what piece of beauty can I notice? What thread of hope can I follow? This choice is quiet, but powerful. It is like changing the key of a song. The melody remains, but the feeling transforms entirely. Awareness is your first freedom. No one can control what you notice, what you give your attention to, and when you recognize that, you begin to reclaim your authorship of life. You are not locked into an unchangeable script. The story shifts when the observer shifts. So today, as you listen, let this truth settle into you. Reality bends at the point of your gaze. The mosaic is waiting up. Every thought, every belief, every tender moment of awareness is another tile you place into the picture of your life. Choose with care, not with fear, but with love. Because the picture you create with your awareness is the world you will walk inside of tomorrow. 2. Language as quantum code. Words are not merely sounds that fall from our lips and dissolve into silence. They are carriers. They are vessels that move energy, thought, and intention into form. When you speak, you are not just describing reality, you are coding it. Your words are like lines of programming written into the quantum field, telling it what patterns to amplify, what possibilities to open, what doors to close. Think for a moment about the way you talk to yourself when no one else is listening. In those quiet hours, when the world is asleep and only your own voice echoes in your mind, what language do you use? Do you whisper to yourself words of kindness, words that open windows to possibility? I am capable. I am learning. I am growing. Or do you, perhaps without realizing it, recite codes that lock you into the old prison of doubt? I'll never make it. I'm not enough. Nothing changes for me. The universe doesn't argue with your words. It doesn't stand there debating, asking, did you really mean that? It simply reflects them back, as though reality itself were a mirror that speaks the language you teach it. To say I am unlucky is not just a complaint. It is a command written into the energetic software of your life. To say I am blessed is not naive optimism. It is another kind of command, one that reconfigures the system you live inside. This is why traditions, both ancient and modern, speak of the creative power of the word. In scripture, in philosophy, in science alike, we find the same thread. Speech is generative. It builds worlds. In the beginning, it is said, the word was present, because the word is not simply sound, it is vibration. And vibration is the language of creation itself. I remember a man who once told me that for years he described himself as broke every day. No matter what came into his life, he told people, I can't afford this. I'm broke. I'm just trying to get by. That was his mantra, his unconscious prayer. And life, faithful to his words, kept showing him evidence to match from. But something shifted when he began replacing even the smallest phrases. Instead of I can't afford it, he said, I'm choosing to invest my money differently right now. Instead of I'm broke, he began to say, I'm learning to steward my resources wisely. They were small changes, but they rewrote the code. Within 2 years, his financial world looked nothing like before. Not because magic rained down on him, but because his words stopped locking him into an identity that didn't serve him. His vocabulary became his liberation. Language, you see, is like a key. Every phrase you use turns the tumblers of invisible doors. Say, I can't, and you hear the click of a lock. Say, I'll try, and a door cracks open just slightly, though not fully. Say, I will, and suddenly the lock falls away. The code has been entered, and the quantum field responds. But this isn't about pretending. It isn't about forcing yourself to speak pretty words while your heart trembles with disbelief. It is about sincerity. When you say, I am healing, you may not yet be whole. but you are aligning your words with the direction of your life. You are entering a code that guides the system toward health, toward renewal, and the quantum field, loyal to its nature, will mirror it back in ways both subtle and profound. Consider how often we use words carelessly, like throwing stones into a pond without noticing the ripples. We curse ourselves when we drop something "I'm so stupid." We diminish our efforts with casual remarks. "That's just my luck." We speak into existence realities we don't even want, forgetting that every word is a seed, and every seed has a harvest. If you want to test this, try an experiment for 1 week. Remove phrases of limitation from your vocabulary. Don't say "I can't." Don't say "I'm unlucky." Don't say "I'm too old." Or "It's too late." Replace them with gentler codes. "I'm learning." "I'm open." "I'm beginning." Then watch, with quiet awareness, how life starts to shift. Not because the world outside is suddenly different, but because you stopped locking the door with your own key. Language is quantum code. Speak with intention, and you will notice the reality you live inside begins to rearrange. The words you plant will grow into the forest you walk through tomorrow. So choose them with care. Let your words be bridges, not bars. Let them be invitations, not condemnations. For in the end, the sentences you whisper into the silence are not only heard by the universe, they are written into the very fabric of your life. 3. The quantum principle. There is a simple yet profound truth that science has quietly uncovered, and it changes the way we see our own lives. The famous double-slit experiment revealed something astonishing. When no one observes, light behaves like a wave, spreading into infinite possibilities. But the moment it is observed, the wave collapses into a single particle, into one definitive outcome. What was once a sea of options becomes one specific reality, chosen, fixed, lived. This is not just physics. It is a mirror of the human experience. Life is full of potential every moment. Every breath holds countless possibilities. You could speak a word of kindness, or stay silent. You could take a step toward courage, or hide in fear. You could choose forgiveness, or you could choose to cling to the weight of resentment. In the unobserved state, all these options exist. But the moment you decide, the moment your awareness falls upon one path, it solidifies. It becomes your lived reality. What this means is that you are never just a passive spectator in life. You are not sitting in the audience while some script plays out on stage. You are the observer who determines which version of the play unfolds. You are the one whose attention collapses possibility into reality. And this is both humbling and empowering. Think about a day when you woke up with dread, rehearsing in your mind everything that could go wrong. By the time you left your house, the world seemed heavy, the air thick with resistance. Conversations felt harder. Obstacles multiplied. In those moments, you weren't just observing reality, you were collapsing it into a particular form by the lens through which you chose to see. And yet, there have also been mornings when you woke with gratitude, when even the simplest cup of tea felt like a gift, when you noticed the way sunlight touched the window. On those days, the world responded differently, didn't it? Opportunities seemed closer, people smiled more easily. It was the same world, but you collapsed a different version of it into being by the quality of your awareness. The quantum principle teaches us that observation is not neutral, it is creative. What you place your attention on expands. What you repeatedly observe with your mind and your heart eventually hardens into the life you walk through. You could say that your focus is the architect, and reality is the structure it builds. But here is the part that is easy to forget. You can choose. You can choose where your gaze rests. You can choose the story you tell yourself. You can choose the meaning you assign to what happens around you. If you look only for betrayal, you will find it. If you look for beauty, it will reveal itself. If you look for proof of your limitations, it will stand at your door. And if you look for evidence of growth, of grace, of possibility, you will collapse that version into your lived world. This doesn't mean that pain vanishes or challenges stop arriving. Life will always offer both the wave of struggle and the wave of strength, both the possibility of despair and the possibility of hope. But your role as the observer means you get to decide which one takes form inside your experience. I remember once speaking with a woman who carried years of grief. She told me she always noticed loss, always expected more of it, always braced herself for the next wave of disappointment. And of course, it kept coming, again and again. It wasn't until she began shifting her gaze, not pretending the pain wasn't there, but choosing to also notice the love that surrounded her, the small blessings in ordinary hours, that her world began to soften. Slowly, quietly, her life reorganized itself around her new observation. Where once she saw only endings, she began to witness beginnings. Where once she saw only absence, she began to experience presence. Her grief didn't erase itself, but it stopped being the only story she lived in. The lesson is gentle, but powerful. What you observe becomes what you experience. Reality is not some cold, distant machinery grinding away outside of you. It is participatory. It is alive with your gaze. And so the question you might ask yourself is, what am I observing today? What do I keep feeding with my attention? Do I collapse the possibility of joy? Or do I collapse the possibility of despair? Do I reinforce limitation? Or do I reinforce expansion? Every choice is subtle, but over time, the sum of those choices becomes your life. The double-slit experiment was not just a lesson in physics. It was a mirror held up to the soul. It whispered, "You are not just in the world is in you, and it responds to you." And perhaps the most healing thing you can realize is that your awareness is not powerless. It is the very axis upon which possibility turns into reality. So today, let your observation be kind. Let it be expansive. Let it be rooted in gratitude, in love, in courage. For the world you observe is the world you create, and you deserve to create one that reflects the deepest truth of who you are. 4. Collective influence. There is a truth we often overlook. The choices we make inside our own hearts do not stay inside. They ripple outward, quietly but surely, shaping the larger field we all share. When you choose to observe life through love rather than fear, you do not only transform your inner landscape, you contribute a new frequency to the collective consciousness. Think of it like this. The world is not just a stage where separate individuals act out their private dramas. It is more like an ocean, and each of us is a drop of water within it. Alone, a single drop may seem small, but together, they form the currents, the tides, the waves. And when even one drop carries a shift in temperature or tone, it influences the whole body of water. One small current, if sustained, can eventually change the direction of the sea. I have met people whose very presence seemed to soften the air around them. They didn't speak loudly. They didn't demand attention. But the frequency they carried, the calmness, the compassion, the groundedness changed the room. Arguments quieted. Tension loosened its grip. It wasn't magic. And it wasn't manipulation. It was resonance. Their inner state offered a new pattern for others to align with. And many did without even realizing it. When you shift from fear to love, from bitterness to forgiveness, you release more than your own burden. You send out a note that others can tune themselves to. And while you may not see the full effect, the field feels it. Just as one candle can light another without diminishing its flame, your choice becomes a spark that multiplies in ways you may never measure. Sometimes we tell ourselves that our individual transformation is too small to matter. After all, what is one person's peace against the chaos of the world? What is one heart's kindness against the machinery of cruelty? But here is the simple truth. Everything is connected. The same field that responds to your observation also carries your resonance into the larger whole. The sigh of relief in your chest is not yours alone. The tenderness in your gaze is not yours alone. These become part of the shared atmosphere, and others breathe it in. Consider how quickly fear spreads. A rumor begins, and soon it moves from one person to another, growing, distorting, amplifying. Fear multiplies because it is contagious. But so is love. So is calmness. So is hope. One person who refuses to escalate anger but instead responds with patience interrupts the pattern, and that interruption matters. It shifts the momentum. It plants the possibility of a new outcome where only repetition seemed possible. I remember once being in a hospital waiting room, a place heavy with worry. Everyone sat in silence, the air thick with unspoken fears. And then, an older man began to hum softly to himself. It wasn't a performance, just a gentle melody he carried. Slowly, shoulders began to unclench, faces softened. By the time he stopped, the entire room felt lighter, as though the frequency had changed. His small act did not erase anyone's pain, but it altered the texture of that moment for all of us. That is the power of one drop of light in a sea of uncertainty. The field we live in is not abstract, it is intimate. It is shaped by what you and I offer it, moment by moment. And this means your healing is never only about you. Your courage to choose love in the face of fear. Your choice to forgive rather than to cling. Your practice of gratitude even in the smallest ways. These do not just build your private reality. They feed into the collective. They become nourishment for others who are weary. A path for others who are lost. If you doubt this, think of the times you have been carried by someone else's light. Maybe it was a stranger who smiled at you on a day you felt invisible. Maybe it was a friend who sat with you in silence when you could not find words. Maybe it was the steady voice of someone who reminded you that you were stronger than your despair. Their choice became your lifeline, if only for a moment. That is how the collective field works. We borrow and lend frequencies. We share and receive. We co-create what it feels like to be alive together. And so, when you decide to orient yourself toward love, you are not only reshaping your own world, you are giving the field a new possibility to align with. A single act of presence can ripple through families, communities, even generations. You may never trace the full extent of it, but it doesn't make the influence any less real. The ocean remembers every drop. The field remembers every note, and one small shift in you can be the beginning of a wave that moves through us all. So perhaps the most profound contribution you can make is not to shout louder, not to control others, but to tend to your own frequency, to keep choosing the observation that expands rather than contracts, that heals rather than harms. For when you shift, the collective shifts with you, even if only by a degree. And that degree, in time, can change the whole direction of the tide. 5. The capacity to change. One of the most liberating truths I have learned is this. The voice with which you observe your life is not your destiny. It is not a fixed inheritance carved into stone. It is a skill, one that can be practiced, reshaped, and softened over time. The lens through which you saw the world yesterday does not have to be the lens you carry tomorrow. Many of us grow up believing that the way we think and feel is simply who we are, as if fear, doubt, or bitterness are permanent features of our character. But the truth is gentler and far more hopeful. Yesterday, you may have looked at life through the lens of fear. Today, you can choose to look at it through curiosity, or gratitude, or even just the willingness to see things differently. And that choice, however small, is the beginning of transformation. I remember seasons in my life when the voice inside my head was harsh, unforgiving, and certain. It told me what I could not do, what I would never become, What dangers awaited me if I dared to hope? I believed that voice for years, as though it was the authority of my life. But then, slowly, I learned that I could question it. I could practice listening for another tone, one that was quieter but kinder. At first, it felt almost unnatural, like speaking a language I had not yet learned. But with time, with patience, I realized that this softer voice had always been available. It was simply waiting for me to give it my attention. Changing the voice of observation is not about pretending everything is fine when it is not. It is not about painting over pain with forced optimism. It is about widening the frame. When fear tells you a story that ends in collapse, curiosity asks, what else could be possible? When bitterness tells you nothing will ever change, gratitude whispers, but look, even here, there is a small gift. When despair insists you are alone, compassion reminds you, someone else has walked this road too. And this shift is not instant. It is not a matter of flipping a switch. It is more like building a muscle. Each time you choose a new lens, each time you pause before reacting and allow yourself to ask, could I see this differently? You are training. You are laying down a new pattern in your mind. One that will, over time, become your default. Think of it the way you would think of learning to play an instrument. At first, your hands stumble. The notes are awkward, the sound unsteady. But you keep practicing, and gradually your fingers remember. Eventually, the melody that once felt impossible becomes natural. The same is true of shifting the voice of observation. At first, it takes effort, but with repetition, the new voice begins to flow more easily, and soon it becomes the soundtrack of your life. There will be days when the old voice returns loud, insistent, convincing. That does not mean you have failed. It simply means you are human. The old patterns may visit, but they no longer have to define you. In those moments, you can pause, breathe, and gently remind yourself, I have another choice, even if you cannot yet hear the kinder voice clearly. The act of remembering that it exists is already a victory. I think of change not as a grand leap, but as a series of small, almost invisible shifts. One day you catch yourself before spiraling into anger, and you choose patience instead. Another day, you notice beauty in something you would have ignored before, the way the light falls through the window, the sound of laughter down the street. Another day, you forgive yourself for not being perfect, and in that forgiveness, you feel a little freer. These moments accumulate, they build upon each other, and then, one day, you look back and realize that the voice guiding you has changed. It is steadier now, gentler, more aligned with who you long to be. The capacity to change is one of life's greatest gifts. It means no story is final, no pattern unbreakable, no inner voice beyond redemption. You are not trapped in yesterday's lens. You are not condemned to repeat the same reaction forever. At any moment, you can practice a new way of seeing, a new way of speaking to yourself, a new way of participating in life. And here is the beauty. Every small shift in you alters not only your own path, but also the collective field we share. When you practice gratitude instead of complaint, you bring a note of harmony into the atmosphere. When you choose curiosity instead of fear, you invite possibility into the room. When you respond with kindness rather than judgment, you expand what is possible for everyone around you. So if today you feel stuck, if you feel defined by the harsh voice of yesterday, let me remind you, you are not fixed. You are fluid, growing, unfolding. The voice of observation is not a destiny handed down to you. It is a language you can learn, a frequency you can tune, a skill you can practice. And with each practice, with each gentle shift, you are not only healing yourself, you are teaching the world, by your presence, that change is possible, that even in the heaviest of seasons, A softer voice can be chosen, and when enough of us choose it, the world itself begins to sound different. 6. The real-life impact of perspective I have learned, often the hard way, that life is not only about what happens to us, it is about how we see what happens to us. Two people can live through the exact same circumstance and come out with entirely different stories. One sees a prison, the other sees a possibility, and though the walls may look the same from the outside, the inner experience could not be more different. I remember a time when I looked at life as though it were a set of chains. Every responsibility felt like a weight on my shoulders. Every disappointment felt like proof that I was trapped. I would wake up in the morning, already bracing for the next struggle, already convinced that freedom was for other people, but not for me. The world reflected that back to me. Everywhere I looked, I saw limitation. Opportunities passed by, unnoticed, because I was too busy staring at the bars I thought confined me. And then, slowly, something shifted. Not because my circumstances changed overnight, they did not. The bills were still there. The responsibilities still heavy. The uncertainties still real. What changed was the lens. Instead of asking, "Why me?" I started asking, "What could this teach me?" Instead of assuming the door was locked, I began to gently test the handle. Sometimes, to my surprise, it opened. That shift in perspective changed the texture of my days. What once felt like burdens began to look like stepping stones. A difficult relationship became a mirror, showing me my own patterns. Financial hardship became a training ground for discipline and creativity. Even loss, as painful as it was, began to carry within it a quiet invitation to love deeper, to value what is fragile, to live more fully in the present. This is not to romanticize struggle. Pain is real, and suffering deserves compassion. But what I have found is that perspective either adds to the weight or lifts it. When I looked at life as a prison, every challenge became another bar, holding me in. When I chose to see life as a series of doors, even if some were still closed, I began to notice light coming through the cracks. And once you see even a little light, you cannot unsee it. Imagine two people standing in a rainstorm. One curses the sky, feeling soaked, misérable, unlucky. The other lifts their face and thinks, "This is the earth being renewed. This is life giving itself back to itself." The rain is the same, but the experience, how it is carried in the body, how it shapes the heart, could not be more different. In real life, this perspective shows up in the smallest choices. You are stuck in traffic. Is it wasted time? Or a moment to breathe? To call someone you love? To sit with your thoughts? You lose a job. Is it the end of your security? Or the push you needed to finally pursue what you have long put aside? A friend disappoints you. Is it proof that people cannot be trusted? Or an invitation to practice boundaries? To clarify what you deserve? None of these choices erase the reality of the situation, but they do change how the situation lives in you. And that, I have come to see, makes all the difference. I have watched people live through tragedies and emerge not bitter but radiant. I have also watched others crumble under far less. The difference is not the circumstance. It is the story they told themselves about what the circumstance meant. Did it mean life was cruel and hopeless? Or did it mean life was challenging them to grow, to open, to find a strength they had not yet known? And here is the gentle truth. We do not always get to choose what happens, but we always get to choose how we meet it. That choice, repeated over time, writes the script of our lives. When you start to see life as opportunity, something subtle but powerful shifts. Your eyes begin to notice doors you would have missed before. You start recognizing teachers in unlikely forms, a stranger's kindness, a child's laughter, even your own setbacks. What once felt like walls become passageways. What once looked like endings reveal themselves as beginnings in disguise. This is not about wearing rose-colored glasses. It is about honesty, but a deeper kind of honesty. It is about acknowledging that reality is shaped not just by events but by awareness. And in that awareness lies freedom. I think of it this way. The world is like a mirror. If you approach it with fear, it reflects fear. If you bring curiosity, it reflects possibility. If you meet it with gratitude, it multiplies what you have to be thankful for. The mirror does not create the expression. It only reflects what is shown. In the same way, life reflects the observer. So, when someone asks me how to change their life, I often begin here: change the way you look at it. Not because perspective is everything, but because perspective is the gateway to everything. Once you shift how you see, your actions shift, your choices shift, your relationships shift, and slowly, the life around you reshapes itself. This is the real-life impact of perspective. It does not make pain vanish, but it softens the edge. It does not eliminate challenges, but it transforms them into teachers. It does not guarantee ease, but it grants resilience. And with resilience, you can walk through storms without being destroyed by them. If you are standing today in a place that feels like a prison, I will not tell you it is easy, but I will tell you this: you have the power to look for the door, even if you can only open it a crack. Even if the light is faint, it is enough. One shift in perspective can change not just the moment, but the story of your whole life. 7. Practicing awareness. There is a quiet power in the act of pausing. In the middle of a busy day, when everything seems to rush forward with its own urgency, there is strength in simply stopping for a breath and asking yourself a gentle question. If I looked at this moment with gratitude, what would I see? If I looked at it with curiosity, what might reveal itself? This is not about pretending that everything is perfect. It is not about denying pain or painting reality with a forced smile. Instead, it is about training the mind to widen its lens, to invite in more dimensions of the truth. Gratitude and curiosity do not erase hardship, but they do soften its grip. They remind us that even within difficulty, something else is also present: a lesson, a hidden blessing, a chance to grow in ways we might not expect. I remember times in my own life when everything felt like it was collapsing. I would sit in silence, my mind racing with questions. Why is this happening? How do I fix it? What if I fail? The more I repeated these questions, the heavier the weight became. It was as if I was feeding the storm inside me. And then, almost by accident, I tried a different approach. I asked, what in this moment can I be grateful for, however small? Sometimes the answer was nothing more than the breath moving through me, or the sunlight across the floor. But that shift changed everything. The storm was still there, but I had found a place of stillness inside it. Curiosity works the same way. Fear says, this is the end. Curiosity whispers, what if it's the beginning of something I can't yet see? Fear shuts the door. Curiosity nudges it open. And often, that small opening is enough to let hope in. Practicing awareness like this is not a one-time revelation. It is a discipline. Just as muscles grow stronger through daily exercise, the mind learns to expand through repeated pauses. At first, it may feel unnatural. You will catch yourself slipping back into old habits of complaint or worry. But each time you pause and reframe, even for a few seconds, you are rewiring your brain. You are teaching it to notice more than just the shadows. And over time, this practice changes the way life feels. Stressful conversations no longer consume you in the same way, because you know how to step back and ask, what else is here? What am I not seeing yet? Challenges become less threatening because curiosity keeps you open to unexpected solutions. Gratitude, even in its smallest doses, becomes a steady anchor, a reminder that life is never just one thing, never just dark or light, but a mixture of both. You might begin this practice in the simplest of ways. While standing in line at the grocery store, notice your breath. While stuck in traffic, ask yourself what hidden gift might exist in the pause. While facing a setback, take one quiet moment to name something you can still be thankful for. These are not grand gestures, but they accumulate, and like drops of water shaping stone, they gradually carve out a new way of being. Some people think of awareness as something lofty or spiritual, but I see it as profoundly practical. It affects how we speak to our loved ones, how we handle disappointment, how we treat ourselves in moments of weakness. When awareness is absent, we react on autopilot, snapping, shutting down, giving in to old fears. When awareness is present, we create space between the event and our response. And in that space lies choice. This, to me, is the heart of freedom, not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of choice within difficulty. The choice to see through gratitude rather than resentment. The choice to meet life with curiosity instead of dread. The choice to soften when the world tempts you to harden. The practice is simple, but it is not always easy. There will be days when gratitude feels impossible, when curiosity is drowned out by fear. That is part of being human. But even then, the pause itself is an act of awareness. Even then, the willingness to ask the question plants a seed. And often, that seed blooms later, in ways we could not anticipate. I often remind myself, awareness is not about changing the outer world first. It is about changing the way I see the world. And when the seeing changes, the living follows. So I invite you pause a few times each day. Ask the question gently, without demand. If I looked with gratitude, what would I see? If I looked with curiosity, what would I discover? Let the answers surprise you. Let them teach you that reality is more spacious than you once believed. Over time, you will find that you are no longer living inside a narrow story of fear or control. You are living in a wider field, one that contains both struggle and possibility, both sorrow and joy. And in that wider field, life feels less like something to survive and more like something to explore. 8. Time as illusion. Time has a way of convincing us that it is the ruler of our lives. We measure everything in it: our age, our progress, our failures, our hopes. We say things like, "If only I had done this sooner," or "One day, when the time is right, I'll change." And yet, when we pause long enough to feel what is truly real, we discover something profound. All possibilities exist only here. In this eternal now, the past is not a place we can revisit. No matter how often the mind tries to, it is a collection of memories, some warm, some painful, that live inside us. The future, too, is not yet formed. It is not a destination waiting for us, but a projection shaped by our present choices. What feels real, what we can actually touch, is only this moment. And within this moment, everything is already alive. The echoes of what has been and the seeds of what can be. When you change the way you observe, you are not just rearranging thoughts, you are shifting timelines. You step out of the loop of repeating yesterday's story. You step out of the grip of regret and anticipation. Suddenly, you realize, I don't have to carry the weight of who I was yesterday into today. I don't have to live in the shadow of what I fear tomorrow. I can begin right here. I remember a time in my own life when I felt trapped by the idea that my past mistakes defined me. I replayed them over and over, believing that they built an unbreakable wall around my future. But the truth is, the wall only existed in my perception. The moment I chose to look at life differently through gratitude, through curiosity, the wall dissolved. The same life, the same circumstances, but a different way of seeing. And that single shift opened a door I didn't know was there. Think of it like standing in a room with many windows. If you fix your gaze on one window, the one clouded with regret, you'll believe the world outside is always dark. If you stare only at the window of fear, you'll think the world is dangerous. But the room itself holds more windows. When you turn your head, you find one filled with light, another with open skies, another with the horizon of possibility. The room hasn't changed. Time hasn't changed. Only your gaze has. This is why people say the present moment is eternal. It is not just a spiritual phrase, it is a lived truth. Every breath is a doorway. Every choice is a brushstroke on the canvas of now. And in this canvas, the past and the future bend. You can heal what once hurt you by choosing to see it differently today. You can shape what's to come by aligning with love and trust now. Time, in this sense, is an illusion because it tricks us into thinking we are powerless. It tells us, you must wait, or it's too late. But awareness shows us otherwise. Awareness says, you can step out of the loop right here. You can write a new sentence in your story at this very moment. It doesn't mean the past disappears. It means you no longer live chained to it. It doesn't mean the future stops mattering. It means you realize the future is born from the quality of your presence today. And when you live this way, life feels lighter. You stop rushing to catch up or make up for lost time. You stop delaying your joy until some imagined tomorrow. Instead, you discover that freedom is not a distant point. It is the breath you are taking now, the choice you are making now, the way you are choosing to see now. So when you feel stuck in cycles that never seem to change, pause and ask, what if time is not a prison, but a canvas? What if the moment I shift my perception, I am already free? Because truly, you are. The chains of time exist only in the story we tell ourselves. The moment you choose gratitude over regret, curiosity over fear, presence over distraction, you step into the timeless field of possibility. And from that space, you are not bound by who you were yesterday, nor by who you fear you will become tomorrow. You are free to live, right now, as the fullest version of yourself. 9. Illustration. Sometimes the most powerful truths are not found in philosophy or theory, but in the quiet unfolding of an ordinary life. Let me share with you the story of a woman who once lived under the heavy weight of an invisible belief. For years, she carried with her the thought, I will never be recognized here. No matter how hard I work, no one will ever see me. And because she held that thought so tightly, her world began to shape itself around it. She noticed every oversight, every meeting where her voice was drowned out, every project where her name was absent from the credits. Even when someone offered her a kind word, she brushed it aside, convinced it was nothing more than politeness. Her mind filtered reality to match her belief, and so her life at work became a mirror of her fear. Each day reinforced the story. She told herself that she was invisible, undervalued, forgotten. It was not that opportunities were absent. It was that she could not see them through the lens she was wearing. But then something shifted, not suddenly, not in a dramatic explosion, but gently, like the slow turning of a tide. One day, she decided to notice differently. She asked herself, what if I've been missing something? What if there are small signs that I've overlooked? And with that question, a crack appeared in the wall she had built around herself. It started with a colleague who thanked her for her careful eye on a report. She paused, instead of dismissing it, and let the gratitude land. Then she noticed how often people came to her for advice, not because they were forced to, but because they trusted her. Slowly, the world that had once seemed barren of recognition began to reveal itself, like hidden seeds sprouting in the soil. And then came the invitation. A manager asked her to step into a leadership role for a new project. In the past, she might have thought it was a mistake, that she wasn't good enough, that they must have asked her only because no one else was available. But now, with her new way of seeing, She allowed herself to believe, maybe they see something in me. Maybe I can step into this space. The work was challenging, but she found herself rising to it. And with every step, she not only gained the respect of others, but perhaps more importantly, she began to respect herself. She discovered that the recognition she had been waiting for all those years was not only external, it was also internal. It was the quiet but steady acknowledgement I matter. My presence makes a difference. The truth is, the outer world had not dramatically changed. What shifted was her observation, her willingness to notice the signs of value rather than the shadows of neglect. And that shift transformed her experience entirely. Her story is a reminder that what we see often has less to do with what is there, and more to do with the lens we choose. The same workplace, the same people, the same daily routine, but two very different realities. One reality said, I am invisible. The other reality said, I am valued and capable. And which one she lived in depended not on time, nor on luck, but on her perspective. This is not to say that external recognition doesn't matter. We all need affirmation. We all long to be seen. But the deeper truth is this: the recognition we receive from others often flows only after we begin to recognize ourselves. Life reflects back what we dare to believe is possible. Her journey also reveals how small shifts in attention can unlock doors we thought were sealed. She did not have to wait for some grand event to change everything. It began with a choice to notice a compliment instead of dismissing it, to interpret a request for help as trust rather than burden, to see herself as part of the circle rather than standing outside of it. From those small shifts, her life began to unfold in larger, brighter ways. I tell you her story not to offer a fairy tale, but to highlight the ordinary power we all hold. You may not be in her shoes, but perhaps you have carried a similar belief that you will never be loved the way you long for, that opportunities are always out of reach, that life has already written you into a minor role, and maybe, like her, you've seen the world echo those fears back to you. But what if today, you allowed yourself a different gaze? What if you chose to notice the small ways life is already supporting you? The friend who listens, the stranger who smiles, the quiet progress you've made. What if you gave yourself permission to believe that the recognition you crave is not a distant dream, but something already forming, waiting for you to open your eyes to it? Her story is not unique because she was extraordinary. It is powerful because she was so ordinary. And because her shift is available to all of us, she reminds us that reality is not fixed. It bends in response to the way we meet it. And when we meet it with openness, gratitude, and a willingness to see differently, we begin to discover the doors that were always there, quietly waiting. 10. The body as an antenna. There is a truth about the body that many of us overlook. It is not merely a vessel that carries us from place to place, nor simply a machine that must be maintained. It is far more subtle, far more intelligent. The body is an antenna finely tuned, sensitive, and responsive to the currents of life that flow through and around us. Think for a moment about how your body reacts even before your mind has words. A sudden tightening in your chest when you sense conflict, a warmth in your belly when someone's kindness touches you, a heaviness in your shoulders when unspoken burdens linger. Your body is always listening, always receiving signals, always transmitting its own quiet broadcasts. Most of the time, though, we live as if we are deaf to it. We rush past the signals, silencing the whispers of our muscles and the subtle rhythms of our breath. We numb ourselves with distraction, convincing ourselves that the body is only there to serve the mind. But the truth is, the body is not separate from the mind. It is the bridge, the tuning fork, the antenna that aligns us with the greater field of existence. When you begin to honor this truth, something shifts. You start to realize that every emotion passing through you is not simply an inconvenience or a random wave. but a signal adjusting your frequency. When you allow gratitude to move through your body, your shoulders loosen, your breath deepens, your heartbeat steadies. When you allow anger to consume you without awareness, your chest tightens, your pulse quickens, your muscles prepare for a battle that may not even exist. Each state of being is a transmission, Sensation, a broadcast. Imagine yourself as a radio tower. The clearer your antenna, the more precise the signal you send out, and the more refined the messages you can receive. If the antenna is cluttered, tangled with static, from unacknowledged stress or repressed emotions, then what you broadcast will also be distorted. You may long for peace, but transmit anxiety. You may crave love, but transmit fear. And life, like an echo, responds not to what you think you want, but to the frequency you actually emit. This is why something as simple as a breath can be so transformative. A single mindful breath is like adjusting the dial of your antenna, clearing the static, aligning your frequency with steadiness and presence. When you pause to breathe with awareness, you are not just filling your lungs, you are tuning yourself, reminding your body of its innate wisdom. You are refining the signal you send into the world. And notice how the body itself teaches us. Tension is not the enemy, it is information. Fatigue is not failure, it is guidance. Even pain, though often unwelcome, can be a teacher pointing us toward what we have ignored. When you listen to your body not as an obstacle but as an antenna, you begin to honor its role in shaping your reality. Let me tell you something I've learned. Through experience, the moments I ignored my body were the moments I became most lost. When I pushed through exhaustion, when I swallowed emotions, when I treated my body as nothing more than a tool, I ended up transmitting chaos, confusion, disconnection. People could feel it in my presence, even if I never said a word. And the opposite was also true. When I slowed down enough to breathe deeply, to soften the tightness in my chest, to let tears fall when they needed to, I found that my whole world softened in response. The people around me shifted. Opportunities arrived more naturally. Life seemed to meet me with a gentler hand. The body, then, is not something to escape or to transcend. It is the instrument through which spirit expresses itself. It is the antenna that allows you to both send and receive the subtle energies of existence. And like any instrument, it requires care, attention, and respect. So what does this mean in practice? It means noticing the signals. It means asking yourself, what is my body broadcasting right now? What is it receiving? It means creating small rituals to honor your body's wisdom. A pause to breathe before responding to anger. A gentle stretch to release stagnant energy. A moment of stillness to feel your heartbeat and remember that you are alive. These are not grand practices. They are simple acts of tuning your antenna so that you resonate more clearly with the life you desire. You do not need to force your body into silence, nor pretend that you are immune to emotion. Instead, you can allow every feeling to pass through, like different notes played on the same instrument. What matters is not suppressing the notes, but allowing the music to stay in tune. And when you treat your body this way as a sacred antenna, you begin to see how much power rests in your simplest choices. The way you breathe, the way you walk, the way you sit in silence. Each is a transmission. Each is a signal to the universe about who you are and how you are willing to meet the moment. The body is not against you. It is for you, always signaling, always guiding, always offering you a chance to adjust. And in honoring it, you not only heal yourself, you refine the signal of your very life. 11. The power of silence. There is a kind of medicine that doesn't come in bottles, and it doesn't come from the outside world. It arises quietly, from a place most of us overlook: silence. Not the silence of an empty room, nor the silence of a paused conversation, but the deep silence that lives underneath all noise. the silence that waits patiently within us no matter how chaotic the world becomes. When you allow yourself to sink into this silence, something remarkable happens. The noise of the world does not vanish. You still hear the hum of traffic, the chatter of voices, the endless demands of life. But you begin to recognize that those things are not who you are. In the silence, you discover a steady presence that observes everything yet remains untouched. It is not dramatic. It does not shout. It simply is. I have found, through my own journey, that silence is not emptiness. It is fullness. It is not absence. It is presence. In silence, you realize that what you have been chasing outside of you has always been available inside. The peace you long for, the clarity you seek, the acceptance you crave, all of it waits in the quiet corners of your being. But because silence does not compete with the noise, you must choose to listen. And here is the gift of silence. It allows you to choose again. In the rush of daily life, we are often pulled by momentum, old habits, reactive thoughts, familiar patterns. We live as though we are trapped in a current too strong to resist. But when you step into silence, even for a few breaths, you step out of the current. You find yourself standing on the riverbank, able to see the flow more clearly. From there, you are free to choose. Do I continue down the same path, or do I step in a new direction? I remember a time in my life when silence terrified me. It felt like loneliness, like abandonment, like staring into a void. But with patience, I began to see that the silence was not my enemy. It was my teacher. It was asking me to sit long enough to hear the whispers beneath the fear. And when I did, I began to hear something else, a voice, not loud or commanding, but steady and kind. A voice that reminded me I was more than my worries, more than my mistakes, more than the roles I played in the world. That voice did not come from outside, it rose up from within the silence itself. In silence, the observer within you wakes up. You begin to notice thoughts as they pass, without having to chase them. You begin to notice feelings without being drowned by them. You begin to realize that you are not the noise. You are the space in which the noise appears. This recognition is both humbling and liberating. Suddenly, the world loses its grip on you, because you understand that what defines you is not the storm outside, but the stillness within. Silence is not about withdrawal from life. It is about engagement with life in a deeper way. When you carry silence within you, you do not stop speaking or acting. You simply speak and act from a place of groundedness rather than reactivity. A harsh word aimed at you no longer pulls you into battle, because silence gives you the space to pause, to breathe, to choose compassion instead of retaliation. An unexpected challenge no longer collapses you, because silence gives you the clarity to see beyond panic and into possibility. Think of silence as fertile soil. In the noise, seeds of intention scatter without taking root. But in silence, those same seeds have a chance to sink into the ground, to draw nourishment, to grow into something lasting. Every dream, every transformation, every meaningful step forward begins in silence. And notice how life itself teaches us this. Night falls, and the world grows quiet. That is when the body heals. When the mind integrates the day, the pause between heartbeats sustains the rhythm of life. The stillness between musical notes creates the melody. Silence is not an interruption of life. It is the foundation of it. So the invitation is simple. Make friends with silence, not as something to escape into forever, but as something to return to regularly. Like a trusted companion, sit quietly, breathe deeply, let the noise settle. At first, you may feel restless, as though you are wasting time. But if you stay, if you soften, you will begin to sense the richness there. And over time, silence will stop being a stranger. It will become a sanctuary. From that sanctuary, You will discover that your life does not need to be defined by the loudest voices around you. You do not need to be carried away by every demand or expectation. You can live with intention, with choice, with grace, and perhaps most importantly, you can begin to hear the whisper of your own soul, a whisper that cannot be heard in the noise, but only in the stillness. In silence, you are not diminished, you are expanded. You are not cut off, you are connected more deeply than ever. Silence is where you remember yourself, where you choose again, where you send out a new whisper to the universe. This is who I am. This is what I choose now. The choice of observation. You see, life is not something happening to you, but something unfolding with you. You are not simply a victim of circumstances, pushed around by forces outside your control. You are a co-creator, shaping reality through the way you choose to see it, the way you choose to respond to it. This truth is both humbling and empowering. Humbling because it shows us how responsible we are for the quality of our own lives. Empowering because it reminds us that at any moment, we can begin again. There is a voice within you, a quiet observer that watches everything. That voice has the power to either keep you trapped in old cycles or to carry you into entirely new possibilities. The difference lies in how you train it, how you choose to use it. If you let it constantly replay the past, then your life becomes a repetition, a loop of old wounds and old patterns. But if you guide it toward gratitude, towards curiosity, toward love, then that same voice becomes a bridge carrying you into a reality you may have never imagined possible. Think about this for a moment. Every day, countless thoughts pass through your mind. Most of them you do not choose consciously. They are echoes of yesterday, habits of interpretation, rehearsals of fears. And yet, each of those thoughts is like a brushstroke on the canvas of your future. What you whisper in your mind today becomes the architecture of tomorrow. It is not just philosophy, it is a lived truth. Look back at your life, and you will see how your focus, your interpretation, your inner dialogue shaped the path you walked. The universe is not distant, cold, or indifferent. It listens, it responds, not in the language of human words, but in the language of vibration, of resonance. What you hold inside becomes the signal you send out. And the remarkable thing is this: the universe does not judge your signal, it simply reflects it back. If you choose fear, you find more reasons to be afraid. If you choose gratitude, more reasons for gratitude seem to appear. If you choose love, love has a way of circling back to you, sometimes in forms you never expected. This is why observation matters so deeply. To observe consciously is to choose the story you will live into. It does not mean denying pain, pretending hardships do not exist, or forcing yourself to feel good when you do not. It means noticing without judgment, pausing long enough to choose your response, and remembering that even in the darkest moment, you still hold the power to turn your gaze toward light. When you practice conscious observation, life becomes less of a struggle and more of a dialogue. Challenges still come, but instead of seeing them as punishments, you begin to see them as invitations. Invitations to grow stronger, to see differently, to rise beyond what you thought possible. The same storm that once felt like destruction begins to feel like transformation. The same silence that once felt like emptiness begins to feel like presence. I do not say this lightly. I have known what it is to feel trapped, to feel as though life is happening beyond my control. I have walked through seasons of fear, of loss, of confusion, but I have also learned that the way I looked at those seasons shaped the way I walked through them. When I looked through the eyes of despair, everything seemed heavy and hopeless. But when I allowed myself, even for a moment, to look through the eyes of gratitude, a new door would appear, an unexpected kindness, a small lesson, a hidden strength. That shift of observation changed everything. Not because the world suddenly became easy, but because I became more open, more resilient, more whole. So I offer this reminder right now. In this very moment, you are shaping your future, not by what you possess, not by what others say about you, not even by the events unfolding around you, but by the whispers of your own mind. Each thought is a seed, each observation a root, and over time, they grow into the forest you will one day walk through. If you want to live in a world of fear, keep planting fearful thoughts. If you want to live in a world of scarcity, keep feeding scarcity in your mind. But if you want to live in a world of peace, of love, of possibility, begin now. With the simple choice to observe differently, look at your life through the lens of gratitude, and notice how it softens even the hardest days. Look at the world through the lens of curiosity, and notice how challenges begin to feel like lessons. Look at others through the lens of love, and notice how even the smallest gestures can ripple outward into something extraordinary. The power is not in waiting for the world to change before you do. The power is in choosing how you see, here and now. Because when you shift your observation, you shift your vibration. And when your vibration shifts, the world cannot help but respond. So let this be your practice. Observe with openness, choose words both spoken and unspoken that lift your frequency rather than lower it. Trust that the universe hears not only the shouts of your actions, but also the whispers of your inner thoughts. And know that every whisper counts. Every whisper carries weight. Every whisper is a brushstroke painting the horizon of your future. You are not small. You are not powerless. You are not at the mercy of life. You are a co-creator. And with each conscious observation, with each choice of gratitude, curiosity, and love, you are not just transforming yourself, you are participating in the transformation of the world. The universe is listening, right now, always. And with every gentle shift in how you see, you are quietly, steadily, powerfully changing your life.